Welcome in, listener. You're listening to a segment from the Slumpbuster podcast with Ju-Ju and Dre. Find the full episode on Spotify, iTunes, the Google Play Store, or our YouTube channel. Enjoy. So, the next big story of the week. Again, we're wrapping a bow on one of the stories that really blew up towards the end of 2019. Houston Astros. The MLB laid down the hammer, or did they? Did you think that this punishment was a little light? Because officially, $5 million on the organization. Then you had AJ Hinch and Luhnow, their GM. They got a year-long suspension from the MLB. And then to add on to that, they got fired from their jobs. The Astros, again, back to the organizational side, lost their first and second round picks in the next two drafts. What do you think? Too light, too heavy? Alex Cora, we'll talk about that one here a little bit minute, but just from the Astros point of view.
I mean, I think it's about right. I think that's about fair. And the GM and the manager, they basically signed almost a death sentence when they got caught. And that's exactly what I thought. And this is the type of punishment that I think all sports organizations need to hand out, is that when there's cheating, and it's blatant cheating, right? I remember the commissioner had sent out an email, sent out a notice that basically said, stealing signs electronically is what is wrong, right? Like, if you can memorize them in your head, you're allowed to do that, right? If you can watch games and figure out, okay, here's what's coming, you're allowed to do that. But stealing signs electronically, they explicitly said that is breaking the rules. And what happened? They blatantly broke the rules. They used it to get some type of advantage. And the league, I think, dropped the hammer enough to basically deter anybody from wanting to do that again. Like, if I'm a GM, I'm looking at that and saying, is it worth me risking basically the rest of my career if I get caught?
Well, the funny thing about that is the GM, he was never really implicated in the setup and the game things going with the whole trash can banging situation. But why he was suspended was because the MLB investigation determined that he knew of it and didn't stop it. It goes into that old saying of see something, say something. Well, he didn't say something. He went silent, and that's why they came down on him. The thing that caught me off guard, because we were coming at this when we last talked about this, was I think they should kick ownership out. I think that anyone, even the highest level, needs to be held accountable for this. Well, Jim Crane, he went unfazed at this. Like I said, he was able to fire both AJ Hinch and Luhnow, But is that right? Is that okay? Because the investigations didn't really necessarily tie anything to him. Are you okay with Jim Crane going through this unfazed?
I mean, personally, no. I think Jim Crane should have some type of punishment, right? I know there's the $5 million, and sure, that hurts your pocketbook, but these dudes are billionaires. $5 million to them, they don't care. Some players are getting paid hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And so you've got guys being paid hundreds of millions of dollars. $5 million to you isn't really that much. And he still basically gets to keep his t-shirt that says, that Houston Astros are world champions. Okay, I'll just hire another GM. I'll hire another manager, and we still get to keep our trophy. We still get to keep our awards. We keep our recognition. And so I think it should have come down a little bit harder on Jim Crane. But at the same time, I could see where the league is coming from and basically saying hey, we don't have enough information. We don't have enough evidence directly tying Crane to this. And as an owner, a lot of times good owners actually let GMs and managers handle everything that's on the field or on the court, and they remove their hands from it. They wash their hands from it, and they sit up in their owner's box and they watch the game every time, right? And they don't know what's necessarily going on down on the field or down on the court. And I do believe that there is the chance, right, that Jim Crane did not know anything about it, and therefore it is difficult to punish him. But like I said, I don't know if it necessarily deters Jim Crane from hiring those sketchy general managers that are willing to push the envelope, because Crane basically comes away from it unscathed. And like I said, he gets to keep his championship, his world championship.
You mentioned he gets to keep his world championship. That's another factor in this. The MLB made the decision to not officially pull the World Series trophies away from them, take the rings away, mark them from the record books, or put an asterisk next to them. Which some people are up in arms about. I'm not. Why I'm not, and we mentioned this before, I never agree when the NCAA goes in and takes wins away or Heisman's away or national championships away, because you know what? I saw the games. We all live in a age where we could just pull up the game results on our phone, pull up the highlights, basically watch the entire game. If I want to go back and watch Game 7 of the 2017 World Series, well, guess what? I could pull it up on my phone right next to me. And that's one of the major reasons why I just don't agree with the philosophy of taking away wins, because we know what happened.
Yeah. And if you're like the Dodgers, right, you're not going to go all of a sudden and print out world championship shirts, because everybody knows that you didn't win that. And there's no way you can go back to that point in time and replay everything and just say, hey, now let's replay it without cheating. Players have moved on. They're on different teams. Players are older, right? Like we've moved on since 2 seasons ago or whatever, right? 3 seasons ago. And so, yeah, there's no way you could replay it. If you put an asterisk next to it, there's no way that the other team can say, well, we're the real champs then. Like it just makes everything tacky, right? And yeah, it's just not a good situation.
Yeah, hold them more accountable to the court of public perception, because history books will basically write for years to come on what happened and how this World Series is viewed. I don't think there's any walking away from the fact that people will forever look at the 2017 World Series as a tainted World Series, regardless if the trash cans even had any effect, because from my understanding on that one, they only did that during the regular season. Maybe they did in the World Series. I think it's a little harder to do given the fact that you have a screaming crowd bumping. I don't think you can really hear trash can through all that noise, but still, you're just going to look at those rings if you're like the players and think, we want it, but I don't feel good about it. And that pivot to the next point here. No player suspensions. Are you surprised that we didn't have this? I mean, players are obviously involved in this. They have to know what those trash can bangings mean, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really surprised that there wasn't any punishments that I know of, right, handed out to players. And so the players, if anybody, they were able to profit off of this scheme more so than even the GM and manager, right? Like they're the ones that got the ring, and they're the ones that, got labeled as world champions. And the fact that nobody was willing to put a stop to it or come forward. And so, sort of like the general manager being guilty by association. Well, these players all knew about it. And these players obviously knew what the trash can banging was. And they were the ones that were utilizing it. So why nobody was punished from a player's standpoint? Maybe the league is thinking that's too many people to punish, right? Because then you got to punish an entire team worth of players. But still, like a fine or something like that, I would think that they would at least do something to say, hey, we're going to make it clear that players should not be involved in this stuff either.
I guess maybe their thought process on it was tying it to a specific player, or for the players that are on different organizations now, do we want to punish these other organizations for something these players did while they were with the Astros in 2017? It's kind of a weird gray area, but I still think that at minimum you should have said, okay, Jose Altuve, and I hate to implicate Jose Altuve because he's been such a great story in the MLB for years, but
yeah.
Sorry, man, you get a 60-game suspension. Even if it's just half a season, that's still, it's something. It's money out of his pocketbook. It's leave without pay. And I think that some of these players should have been impacted in a way because they were the ones that actively participated, like you said, benefited from it on the field. They were more involved than Luhnow in this whole situation.
No, and I think that is really the issue is how do you make it a fair punishment to all players that were involved, even if they're not necessarily on that team anymore, without being unfair to the organization that has picked them up since, right? And to me, I think the best way to do that is just a personal fine on the players and just say, hey, we're taking money out of your pocketbook then, right? Like we're not, we can't necessarily ban you for any number of games, because if you do it to, let's say, an Altuve, right? Well, then Altuve is going to say, well, what about all these other guys that were also involved in it, but you're not banning them because they just happened to be picked up by another team,
Well, a tough thing to do about that with fines, in particular when it comes to MLB contracts, is not everyone's making the same amount. Not everyone's making superstar money. In fact, the lower level guys that haven't even got their first big contract in the MLB are making in the $100,000 range, which, I mean, still great. Don't get me wrong, $100,000 to play a game. But if someone tells you oh, Jose Altuve, you have to get a $1 million fine, let's say, then how do you scale that to the lower level guys that were also doing it, that were on their rookie deals at the time?
Yeah, and maybe it's like a percentage thing, right? A percentage of your contract, right, during that year or whatever. But then I'm sure there's player bonuses and all kinds of different things, right, that maybe they earned it that season. But
yeah. I mean, while the investigation's not done, they can still levy punishments and fines. In fact, one of the second phases to this story is going to be Alex Cora. So Alex Cora, he was the hitting instructor for the Astros, or the hitting coach during their 2017 title run. And he was also the head coach of the World Series champions, Boston Red Sox. 2 championship teams Alex Cora was involved in, 2 teams that have been getting investigated for scandal in the last couple months. And now he doesn't have a job. He hasn't had an official punishment handed down aside from the firing, because they couldn't punish him for the 2017 stuff without first finishing up their investigation on the 2018 stuff. So what do you make of Alex Cora? Do you think this guy just needs to be gone forever?
I would 100% think so, right? Like and this is what I'll always argue, and this was the argument that I had about John Jones, right, when we were talking about best fighter of the decade. I think this stuff should disqualify you from participating or having accolades, right? And it's the same argument that I'll have with the Patriots, and people will call me a Patriots hater or whatever. The fact that you're getting caught repeatedly doing shady behavior and you're blatantly cheating, in my opinion, you have to be gone from the league. And so I'm glad that, you know, the organizations were willing to stand up and say, hey, you're fired, even before a punishment was handed down.
If you're the Red Sox, though, you're doing it because you don't want to have similar fines levied against your organization. I mean, they still might. I don't think the MLB is going to let them walk away unscathed if something pulls out like they were using the iWatches, which is, I think I've heard murmurs that was kind of what was involved. I think if it was like iWatches and stuff like that, it might even be worse. But which is a shame, because I think that 2018 Red Sox team was one of the most talented teams that we've seen in the MLB in recent history, probably even better than 2017 Astros squad.
No, and I mean, and that's the thing, and it's sad, but this also leads to the point that, like, hey, is cheating obviously giving these guys the competitive advantage, right? Is that 2017, they're able to cheat and get a competitive advantage. 2018, they're able to cheat, get a competitive advantage. And therefore, is cheating the reason why they're winning, not so much that they're very talented or really good at managing teams and all of that stuff. And I get it. Like, every team probably cheats, right? Like baseball in general, I think there's a lot of people that try to find some type of edge, however it might be. But still, when you have a track record, especially across multiple organizations, I definitely think that warrants you being barred from the league.
What do you think this means, though, for Major League Baseball? Because you have two championships that have kind of like a stain on them. In recent history, yeah, you levied the punishments. Yeah, you came down hard on these organizations, or so we think right now, again, waiting on the Red Sox decision. But that's like the second biggest like scandal in the last 20 years for the Major League Baseball. So you had the steroid scandal in the early 2000s, which Bud Selig almost encouraged until the point he couldn't encourage anymore. And then Manfred, I mean, I don't think he's actively telling players like, oh yeah, go out there and steal each other's signs. Like, this is one of his biggest official decisions he's had to make as the commissioner of Major League Baseball since he's taken on that role. And I think he handled it admirably, but the point is it still happened. It still happened under your watch. And there is so much more that can be done because technology is ever increasing. We joked about the potential for cyber warfare in the MLB, like literal satellites spying down on people. But I mean, these organizations have money and like technology keeps getting better. And every generation, every player is always looking for that one way to get ahead. I don't care who you are. I don't care how holier than thou you are. That's what sports are all about. You look for that competitive advantage. There's different ways of going about it, and some are moral gray areas, whether that be using technology, which is why this one is such a black stain, or whether it be PEDs, which is another, just, you know, like you look at that as a difference than you just being able to use it through your own mental wherewithal and, you know, physical abilities. I don't know, like what do you make of this for Major League Baseball? Good, bad, do you think indifferent?
I mean, I think it really is a really big stain on MLB, right, and the sport of baseball. And in fact, I've even heard people come out and say, like, I think baseball is the dirtiest of the professional sports, right? And maybe it's a little bit unfair. Maybe it's because it's right there blatantly in our minds, right? And we just saw this big scandal. But like you said, they've had the steroid scandal. They've had, you know, this form of cheating with the technology. There's also been the juiced balls, even though that's not necessarily cheating, right? But some people are saying like, hey, maybe that's like a form of dishonesty in a sense, right? And
boosting the ratings with the long ball, yeah.
Exactly. And so I think this further hurts and tarnishes the MLB's sort of reputation and what they are as a sport at the moment, just because like, hey, you have all these cheaters, you have all this dishonesty. And I think, you know, it's going to start hurting possibly ticket sales. Like they're already sort of struggling to put butts in seats at baseball games. And a lot of teams are having to figure out like what sort of promotions can we do? And, you know, how can we make baseball games fun again? What can we do to get butts in seats? And stuff like this definitely makes it harder.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always going to love baseball. I'm always going to enjoy my Giants, well, when they're good. I was going to make an effort to see the World Series, see the playoffs. So like this doesn't affect me overall. I mean, I grew up during the steroids era. We both grew up during the steroids era. In fact, I mean, I was probably pro steroids. This is a little bit of a different animal because I do think that steroid juice balls, that's more built for your entertainment. When you have like another team that has this competitive edge, it's cheating because it's not like the Dodgers or the Yankees or any other team that played the Astros or Red Sox in those given years were doing this on the field at the same time. With steroids, there was a difference because for every juiced batter, there was a juiced pitcher throwing it to him. So there was a counterbalance there. This one just feels so much dirtier just because only one team was profiting off of it. Only one team was benefiting off of it. And one team held the trophy at the end of the season. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just so happened to be those teams that were benefiting from the cheating, right?
All right. Well, I mean, we'll see what happens. We'll see what kind of suspensions that Alex Cora may get. I think he's just going to get a lifetime ban, and I think that's justified by Rob Manfred. But we'll move on because there's still a lot to be figured out in that whole situation.